Chapter 54, Chapter 48. Eliza sat across from Dumbledore, blatantly ignoring the rather obvious stack of issues of the Insider in the corner of his office. He hadn't mentioned the paper to her, and Eliza was certain he had made no connection between her and the Insider. No, Eliza was in his office today for another Merlin damned lesson. She had thought with the reveal of the Horcruxes the lessons would have stopped. But apparently Dumbledore was still chasing the breadcrumbs of Tom's misadventures and was determined to drag Eliza down memory lane with him. She would rather not, really, but it wasn't up to her. So, Eliza, have you managed the task I set you at the end of our previous lesson? No, Eliza said breezily, ignoring Dumbledore's look. Sir, unless you're asking me to blackmail him, I'm possibly the worst person to trust with this task. You're not the only one who remembers Tom Riddle, Eliza pointed out, but Dumbledore's grave look didn't shift. And you feel that you have exerted your very best efforts in this matter, do you? Eliza felt herself bristle. How dare this man attempt to chastise her for not being his perfect child soldier? How dare he sit there and act disappointed in her, as if she had let him down when he has done nothing but ruin her life at every turn? Eliza's wand hand twitched in her lap. I'll do my best to acquire the memory, sir, she said instead, as polite as she could manage, and Dumbledore nodded his head in acceptance, the grave look disappearing from his face. Then we shall say no more about it just now, said Dumbledore, but continue with our story where we left off. You remember where that was. Tom had just murdered his Muggle relatives and stolen the gaunt ring to possibly turn it into a Horcrux. Eliza recited and smothered a grimace when Dumbledore gave her an approving smile. Now I had wanted to share with you two memories tonight. However, I'm afraid we need to delve into a little context first. Eliza barely restrained a sigh. There are few memories of Tom Riddle once he left Hogwarts. He surprised many of us, you see. Dumbledore whittered on about Tom's past, and Eliza did her best to blank it out. She knew what Tom had told her, that he had left Hogwarts to work in Borgin and Berks, that he didn't want to bother with a small ministry position when there was so much more out there waiting for him. It felt wrong to hear it from Dumbledore, the way he painted Tom as some insidious villain. She was thankful when he finally reached the end of his ramblings, but her relief only lasted for a few sparse seconds. And now it is time to visit the memory of Hokey the house elf, who worked for a very old, very rich witch by the name of Hepzibah Smith, Hepzibah Smith. As in Hufflepuff's cup, Hepzibah Smith. As in the Hufflepuff cup that everyone saw Eliza receive in third year, because Tom Riddle was a dramatic prick who constantly inadvertently screwed himself over with his stupid magpie tendencies. After you. Eliza ducked her head into the pensive and was immediately confronted with the horrifying sight of Hepzibah Smith. She could finally understand why Tom always looked somewhat traumatized when he mentioned her. How do I look? Said Hepzibah, turning her head to admire the various angles of her face in the mirror. Lovely, madam, squeaked Hokey, and if Eliza wasn't still cursing Tom in her head, she would have felt pity for the elf. Hokey tottered off out of the room as Smith navigated her parlor, which was overly cluttered, looking more like an antique shop than a living room. Eliza was still watching the woman, not even bothering to conceal her disdain, when Dumbledore joined her. They stood in silence until Hokey returned with Smith's guest, Tom. He was older than he looked now, paler with longer hair. He picked his way through the room elegantly, and Eliza tracked his movements. There was a polite, charming smile on his face when he presented the flowers to Smith, but Eliza could see the tension in him, in the tilt of his chin and the straightness of his spine. Tom had always been a good actor, but he would never be able to fool her. Mr. Burke would like to make an improved offer for the goblin-made armor, said Tom, charming and polite, as he spoke to the woman. 500 galleons. He feels it is a more than fair. Now, not so fast, or I'll think you're only here for my trinkets. Pouted Hepzibah, and Eliza winkled her nose in disgust as the woman continued to ramble on with herself. I'd be glad to see anything that Miss Hepzibah shows me, Tom said with a lecherous smirk, and Hepzibah let out a horrible high-pitched girlish giggle. Eliza watched the memory play out, each moment more damning than the last. Dumbledore wouldn't know she had Slytherin's locket, but the whole of Hogwarts had seen her receive Hufflepuff's cup. Time to go. Eliza, Dumbledore said quietly, interrupting Eliza's quick thinking as he pulled them both out of the pensive. That was Hufflepuff's cup. Eliza said immediately after leaving the memory. He stole Hufflepuff's cup. Dumbledore nodded. But Eliza stuttered out. But he gave that to me years ago. Why did he? Was it a Horcrux? Eliza rambled on, trying her best to fix Tom's idiocy. I believe he did intend to use Helga Hufflepuff's cup as a Horcrux. Now, however, I have my doubts, Dumbledore said, a serious look in his eyes. I am sure the cup entrusted to your keeping was not a Horcrux. I believe Voldemort intended to use the Founder's items for his Horcruxes, but perhaps set his sights on other things. Eliza gnawed on her lip, eyes darting around the office before she looked towards Dumbledore. Sir, she began hesitantly, do you not think he could have absorbed the Horcrux? Dumbledore's look turned slightly pitying. The only way to absorb a Horcrux would be to feel true remorse. I know you believe otherwise, my girl, but Voldemort could never be capable of such a thing. This was brilliant. Dumbledore was so caught up in his own twisted perceptions, he wouldn't even consider any other alternative. Eliza could probably push the truth in his face, and he'd still rather turn a blind eye than admit to his mistakes. Hufflepuff's cup will remain a mystery to us. However, I'd like you to focus on another item in the memory. Dumbledore spoke up after a prolonged silence, and Eliza nodded. Slytherin's locket. Hepzibah Smith was dead 2 days later, and both the cup and the locket were gone. You saw his reaction when Hepzibah mentioned the young woman Burke had swindles, yes. I believe Voldemort took Slytherin's locket in remembrance of his family line. And now for the last recollection I have to show you. 10 years separate Hoki's memory, and this one, 10 years during which we can only guess at what Lord Voldemort was doing. Eliza knew what Tom was doing. He had gained political power, made allies and progress, and started movements. He had traveled and learned and grown. He had gotten blackout drunk in New Orleans and woken up in Amsterdam, and he had studied and studied and studied to become the wizard he was today. And then he had tried to come home. After you, my girl, Dumbledore said, and Eliza once again fell into the pensive, only to land in the very same place she had left. In fact, the only discernible difference between this memory and her present was that Dumbledore's face looked perhaps just a little less lined. The younger Dumbledore seemed to be waiting for something, and sure enough, moments after their arrival, there was a knock on the door. Tom entered the room, and Eliza winced at the sight of him. His eyes were bloody, skin waxy and pale, and he had a hollowed, gaunt look about him. Eliza knew he had just made another Horcrux and cringed at the sight of how it had affected him. Eliza watched as Tom and the younger Dumbledore interacted, the tension stifling even in a simple memory. I have returned, Tom said after a little while, later perhaps than Professor Dippet expected, but I have returned nevertheless, to request again what he once told me I was too young to have. Eliza listened intently as the scene played out, her heart in her throat even though she knew how it ended. She couldn't believe some of the things Tom said. His pride was the one thing he would never give up, and to hear him submit to Dumbledore, even if it was just an act, was jarring. Will you let me return? Will you let me share my knowledge with your students? I place myself and my talents at your disposal. I am yours to command, and what would have happened if Dumbledore would have said yes? Would Tom have been contented with his life? Or would he still struggle like Eliza did, with boredom and impatience and a desperate, hungry need for more? There was no point dwelling on it. They would never know. The time is long gone when I could frighten you with a burning wardrobe and force you to make repayment for your crimes. But I wish I could, Tom. I wish I could. Tom's wand hand twitched, Eliza's mirroring the movement, before the moment passed. With a bitter, empty smile, Tom turned away and strode straight out the door, leaving his home behind him for another 40 years. Eliza felt Dumbledore pull on her arm and found herself back in the same office from the memory, as if nothing had changed between then and now. He was applying for the defense position, wasn't he? Eliza asked quietly, and Dumbledore nodded his head. And yet you didn't believe him. Voldemort has never had any patience for idiots. He had no friends nor peers. He was not fit for Hogwarts, Dumbledore explained, obstinately sticking with his views instead of missing what was right in front of him. You think he came back for something else, don't you? To hide a Horcrux here in Hogwarts so he could have the last word. Eliza offered, and Dumbledore nodded, although confusion tinged his features. Why else would he have come back? he asked, and Eliza smirked wryly, shaking her head. Oh, headmaster, even monsters get homesick from time to time. After that, Eliza was Dumbledore-free for a while. There would be no more lessons until she got the memory from Slughorn. Eliza had decided to wait for the Slug Club, meeting at the end of the month, to corner the potion's master. Issues of the Insider were released every Monday, and according to Tom, the Wisengamot had never been more divided than when they all read her article on the drop in childbirth over the past 30 years, especially when she not so subtly suggested the reason why may be down to the banning of rituals. Apparently, the ministry was tearing themselves to pieces. Other than that, she had spending time with her court. Draco had surprisingly taken over writing the sporting segment of the Insider, and they both spent their Mondays in the Chamber of Secrets drafting and redrafting the next issue. Theo had wandered down with them at one point and actually swore when he saw the collection of skeletons Eliza had in the corner of the room. Please tell me those aren't human bones. Of course they're not human bones. Eliza scoffed. Do you know how hard it is to get a full set of human bones? Please stop talking, Draco pleaded, and Eliza shrugged smallly before leading them to Salazar's office instead. Theo had not visited the chamber since. Eliza couldn't really blame him, although he should be thankful he only saw the skeletons. Being a necromancer was a bit of a messy business at times. Things were quiet for a while after that, other than Theo receiving weekly letters from Draco's cousin, Sinclair. They had all taken to teasing him over the growing relationship between them, and Eliza could finally understand why all of them gossiped over her and Tom so much. She had even placed a bet herself this time. In fact, nothing much of anything happened until she was cornered by one Hermione Granger near the end of the month. Potter, she said as they both walked out of their alchemy class, can we talk? Eliza studied her for a few moments before nodding her head in acquiesce. Follow me. I know a room near here. Granger trotted behind her faithfully as Eliza led them to the room the Weasley twins used to experiment in. Some of their old stuff was still lying about the room, a packet of puking pastilles and a few fake wands. Eliza threw herself down onto one of the bean bags in a show of carelessness, although she slid her wand further down her robe sleeve in case Granger tried to do anything. Granger continued to stand stiffly until Eliza gestured to the other beanbag in the room. Granger eyed her dubiously before sitting down primly with a small sniff of disdain. What do you want, Granger? Eliza asked, and finally some nervousness leaked through Granger's confident composure. You said something to me on the night of Slughorn's party. Eliza winced. Granger, if I spoke to you on the night of Slughorn's party, you're going to have to jog my memory. I'm sure you noticed I was pretty far gone. Seemingly in spite of herself, Granger let out a laugh before explaining. You said that I've been ignoring wizarding culture. But I'm friends with Ron, and he's never said anything about any culture outside of pureblood supremacy, which obviously isn't Granger. Eliza cut in. Has Weasley ever told you why his family are considered blood traitors? Because they don't hate muggles and muggleborns, Granger said, although she sounded a bit doubtful, and Eliza shook her head. The Weasleys come from a long family line of purebloods, such as the Prewetts and the Blacks. But they renounced the oldie ways long before they became banned and betrayed their own blood, which is any W-itch or wizard blood status aside. See, Granger exploded. What do you mean by the oldie ways? And what's been banned? I feel like no one tells me anything, Eliza grimaced, nodding in agreement. It's hard to find out when no one wants you to. Thankfully, I took the precaution of having good friends and slightly illegal books. Have you been reading The Insider? She asked suddenly, and Granger nodded, confused. It seems to take a somewhat anti-ministry stance, but other than that I've been finding it a lot more reliable than the Daily Prophet. I never knew anything about the Department of Mysteries, and I thought the writers have been rather clever referring to Muggle experiments that have already been conducted in the past. That one with a Mortentia was inspired. Granger rambled on, and Eliza repressed a smug smile that threatened to break across her lips. Keep up with that paper is my advice, she said, and then paused, debating in her head. Granger was a rather formidable witch, and it could only look better for Eliza and Tom if not all of their supporters came from old pureblood families. Remember in second year when you broke into the common rooms and I said you owed me a favor? Granger pursed her lips and nodded unhappily. I'm cashing it in. I'm going to give you a book to read that should answer all your questions. However, it's banned by the ministry, so my favor is that you don't tell anyone what you're reading or who gave it to you. They banned books, Granger gasped, clearly horrified, and Eliza smirked wryly. Very Fahrenheit 451, in my opinion. Granger let out a startled laugh. I've missed people not picking up on my book references. Well, come and find me after you've read this book, and we can talk more. Eliza hopped up from her beanbag and pocketed a few of the Weasley twins' fake wands for good measure. She walked out the room, leaving a confused but agreeable Hermione Granger behind her. If only Slughorn would be that easy to convince. Eliza straightened out her skirt as she walked into the common room. Blaise and Draco were already down there, dressed in casual wizard robes, and Eliza greeted them with a small smile. "What are you doing?" Blaise demanded the second he caught sight of her, and Eliza smiled innocently. "What do you mean? You never look this happy going to a slug club meeting, so I'll ask again. What are you doing?" Eliza heaved a sigh and slipped her arm through both Blaise's and Draco's as they started walking out of the commons together. "I plan on getting that memory from Slughorn tonight." "Great," Draco said bitterly. "Do we even have an escape route?" "Of course you do. I'm asking after you all leave." "Oh, thank Merlin," Draco breathed out with a huge sigh of relief. "Why? Can't keep up with me, Malfoy." "Eliza, even the Dark Lord himself struggles to keep up with your batshit schemes." She couldn't argue with that. The three of them finally reached Slughorn's office, and Eliza plastered a charming smile on her face seconds before Slughorn opened the door. "If it isn't my favorite Slytherins." Slughorn boomed and ushered them in. Almost everyone was already there, and Eliza slipped into the seat next to Granger, much to everyone's obvious bafflement. "You're too kind to us, Professor," Draco said, with a half-smile, and Slughorn let out a pleased laugh. Before conversation could continue, however, Eliza interrupted. "I brought something for you, Professor," Eliza said sweetly, reaching into her pocket and unshrinking a box of crystallized pineapples. "I heard they were your favorite." Eliza slid the box across the table and watched as momentary panic crossed Slughorn's face before he gathered himself together. "Quite right, M-girl, quite right," he said with a laugh, and started opening up the box. "My, the things you find out makes a person wonder." "Sirius likes to reminisce quite a bit," Eliza said, and then grinned cheekily. "I'm sure you remember the incident with the flying motorbike." Slughorn let out a roar of laughter and began telling the story for everyone else, and she and her court discreetly clinked their glasses together in a small toast. Eliza's schemes were usually crazy, but at least they did usually work. "Is that the time?" Slughorn exclaimed, as if he wasn't acutely aware of how long he had been ranting on at them all. "It's time to go, before you all get caught out after curfew." The others started leaving, and Draco and Blaise shot her a look as they walked out of the room. Eliza stayed behind and flicked the rim of her wine glass, the sound ringing out across the room, and Slughorn whirled around, panic in his eyes. "Eliza, M-girl. What are you still doing here?" "Sir, I wanted to ask you something." Slughorn shuffled nervously, and Eliza allowed a sharp smile to cross over her face. "Sir, I was wondering what you knew about Horcruxes." Slughorn reeled back, a look of fury and horror on his face. "He put you up to this, didn't he?" "Dumbledore needs that memory. I wasn't talking about Dumbledore," Slughorn bellowed, and Eliza froze, narrowing her eyes. "Oh." Eliza questioned softly, hand coming to rest on her wand. "Do let me in on the secret, Professor." Slughorn let out an angry scoff. "Do you take me for a fool? People talk and I may be old, but that doesn't make me slow. I know who you are, and I know you're one and the same as him, as Tom Riddle used to be, as he still is." Eliza cut in sharply, dropping all pretense, and Slughorn let out a bitter, pitying laugh. "He's lying to you. The boy I knew died a long time ago," Slughorn said angrily. "You've allied yourself with a monster. I thought you said you knew me, Professor." Eliza cut in coolly, a small smirk playing on her lips. "You should know that I'm a bit of a monster myself." Slughorn's eyes narrowed as he shuffled from foot to foot. "You must have heard the rumors," Eliza simpered before she began quoting the Hogwarts rumor mill. "Eliza Potter's a dark lady. Remember what she did to McLaggen." "Eliza Potter is insane, a dark witch. Surely you heard about the incident with Blishwick. I took over Slytherin House in 2 years, and you know something else." Eliza questioned, shifting forward slightly just to see Slughorn take a discreet step back. Dumbledore knows all of this, and he still entrusted me to be your savior. So I'd say the lines between hero and villain are a bit blurred, wouldn't you, Professor? Eliza questioned, twirling her wand in her hand. What's your point? Slughorn asked, eyes narrowing when Eliza gave an elegant shrug. I'm saying that there is no good and evil. There is only power. So tell me, Professor, Eliza drawled, tilting her head slightly as she studied him, are you someone who is too weak to seek it? Slughorn didn't say anything, merely continued to watch Eliza as if she was more beast than human, something wild to be wary of, as if she was something to fear. But there was a look in his eyes, something conflicting, that told her not to give up just yet. You may know me, Professor, but I also know you. I know you thought Tom would go far, I know you supported his cause, and I know when he became Voldemort you never recovered from the guilt of giving him the information that ruined his life. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a smart man, Professor. You can see what's happening to our world, and yet you're throwing away your chance to change it all. Are you a Slytherin or not? Eliza finished harshly and watched as Slughorn deflated. His anger disappeared, leaving him standing small and weary in front of her. You're still young, my girl. I've made far too many mistakes in my time to make another one. But this isn't a mistake, sir. We have a chance, a real chance to fix things once and for all, Eliza said earnestly, slipping her wand back up her sleeve. And you're telling me you want to choose the wrong side. A silence settled over them, and Eliza didn't let herself flinch, continuing to stare steadily at Slughorn as she saw the man's resolve waver. We're not good people, Eliza said softly. I won't lie to you about that. But you said you knew what kind of people we are, so let me ask you this. Do you really think we'll ever stop until we win? Silence, and then Slughorn heaved a heavy sigh. I hope I'm not making the biggest mistake of my life. You know, Eliza said brightly, you're not the first person who said that to me. For some reason, Slughorn didn't look very comforted by that. What do you need me to do? Eliza knocked on Dumbledore's door the next morning, Slughorn's memories in hand. The potions professor had been rather confused over why Eliza still needed the memory, until she had explained to the man just how far her and Tom's deceit ran. To say Slughorn had been surprised would be a rather large understatement. Come in, Dumbledore called, and Eliza started walking up the spiral staircase. Tom had been rather surprised as well. When she told him, Slughorn was now agreeing to throw his lot in with them. They had yet to iron out the details, but Eliza was sure just having Slughorn recommend the insider to people would increase their chances of winning their political warfare. They were so close to winning now, it was almost unreal. For years they had worked towards this, decades in Tom's case, and now they were almost there. Eliza walked into Dumbledore's office with a bright smile on her lips and plunked down the file containing Slughorn's memories onto the desk. I have the real memory from Slughorn, Eliza announced, and Dumbledore rose from his chair, far more sprightly than Eliza had ever seen him before, and fetched his pensive. Now then, my dear girl, the elderly headmaster said, uncorking the file and tipping the memories into the pensive, we shall see if your theory was right. She and Dumbledore peered into the pensive, and then they were falling down into one last memory. They landed in Slughorn's office. The clock chimed, and the memory played out in front of them. Eliza admired Tom as he carefully wheedled the information out of Slughorn. His flattery would have been building up to this moment for weeks. The hesitant tone, the carefully measured bashfulness. It was quite masterfully done. She would have been surprised if Slughorn could have even managed to deny him. I mean, Tom was saying in front of them, would one Horcrux be much use? Can you only split your soul once? Wouldn't it be better, make you stronger, to have your soul in more pieces, I mean? For instance, isn't 7 the most powerful magical number? Dumbledore let out a grieved, resigned sigh next to her. Eliza shared his emotions. Everyone talks about the tragedy of Icarus, but they never speak of the people who had to witness him fall. Dumbledore pulled them both from the memory, and they returned to the office. Somehow Dumbledore's face appeared more aged than ever before. 6 Horcruxes, Eliza said, breaking the grim silence that had settled over them. 5, Dumbledore returned. You forget you've had a head start on destroying them, my girl, Tom Riddle's diary. The gaunt ring, Eliza said, and Dumbledore nodded his head in acknowledgement. By the time I tracked down the ring, Voldemort had already noticed my movements and moved the ring to a safer location. However, this still leaves us with 4 missing Horcruxes. Tom was going to be so smug when she told him about this meeting. Well, actually, Eliza was going to be smug because without her helping him, he would probably be dead 5 times over now already. Slytherin's locket will be one, Eliza pointed out, frowning pensively. I would have said Hufflepuff's cup, but obviously he never used that. Maybe he intended to use the Founder's heirlooms, but never found the last 2. And so focused on acquiring a set of something else. Perhaps, Dumbledore mused, but I'm afraid we have other pressing matters to attend to aside from what objects Voldemort used for his Horcruxes, such as, Eliza questioned, raising an eyebrow. Where is he keeping them? Dumbledore questioned. I have been traveling all year to locate a Horcrux, reveal any sign of one. I hate to ask any more of you, Eliza, but do you know anywhere that Voldemort may use to store a Horcrux? He asked gravely, and Eliza looked down at her lap, twisting her hands in a show of anxiousness as she desperately tried to cover up a smirk. When we used to speak, Eliza began hesitantly. He once told me about this beach that he visited as a child. There was this cave. I don't know, she finished despairingly, and Dumbledore smiled consolingly at her. Thank you, my dear girl. You wouldn't believe how much this information helps, he said, and Eliza smiled bashfully before once again wringing her hands together. And once all the Horcruxes are destroyed, he'll be mortal. Dumbledore nodded solemnly. And then I'll be able to kill him. She finished with finality, and Dumbledore once again nodded his head, face not betraying the spider's web of lies he had weaved around her. I'm sorry I have to ask this of you, Eliza, he said, but Eliza shook her head. He betrayed me. He was supposed to care about me, and he betrayed me, who gave Dumbledore the right to decide if she should live or die. And he won't ever apologize for what he did, for what he's done to everyone. How many other Tom Riddles have there been? How many more Severus Snapes has Dumbledore turned a blind eye to? He will get his recompense, and I will happily be the one to deliver it, Eliza finished viciously. A tense silence settled over them before Dumbledore spoke again. In that case, Eliza, I feel as though you have earned the right to come with me the next time I go searching for the next Horcrux. Eliza smiled sharply. Albus Dumbledore had just sealed his own fate. Eliza would personally make sure he didn't make it out of that cave alive. It would be my pleasure.